Hello and welcome to the ECR Retail Loss Sell More and Lose Less podcast. This week I'm joined by Professor Emmeline Taylor to talk about the challenges of forecourt drive-offs and no means of payment. You know, at ECR for the last maybe even 8 years or so, we have been covering retailers who have forecourts and looking at the problem of no means of payment, but also drive-offs. And we have the groups represented mainly by UK retailers. We've had some American retailers, but our model in the UK, at least, and Australia, is on petrol forecourts. At least we try to encourage people to go into the shop and make purchases, and that's kind of how the model works. So you fill up with petrol, you walk into the petrol station, into the convenience store, you buy some goods, pay, and then you drive off. Of course, we then have people who forget that part of the process and just drive off. And we saw some great examples when we first started this from New Zealand, with even the police actually driving off without paying for it by mistake. Whoops. But also no means of payment, which is, again, something that happens, people coming in and just saying, look, I forgot my bank cards, whatever. And so we've been looking at the role of technology, and this is the video working group that sort of like kind of has picked this up. What role can ANPR play in this? But as we've discovered, there's also some fundamentals around digital reporting. So moving away from just the sort of paper and pen approach and try to remember the number. And always remember this particular group, one retailer shared that they installed ANPR, but it was covert to the member of the public, but it was overt, and the store staff knew about it. And within the first 3 months of the trial, the number of drive-offs went down by 60%. I wonder why that happened.
Very interesting.
So clearly collusion is a big part in this. So this year we had a record number of retailers on, again mainly from the UK, the likes of Tesco's and BP's and Shell and Asda's and all the other retailers in the UK who sell petrol. So probably about sort of 80 or 90% of the market for petrol were represented on the call, including some independents. And we had a case study from one of the retailers just showing, we've introduced digital reporting, we've introduced ANPR, and these are our levels of losses. And so this was an independent, and then through to another retailer that had just moved to the sort of introduction of digital reporting, moving away from paper reporting. And then with digital reporting, it's kind of a third-party service, so you hand it off and someone then does the civil recovery. So that's kind of where, so you improve your number of claims and all the rest of it, improve the reporting, of course. So that's the setup. So just, from your perspective, you joined the call, thank you. What were some of the things you picked up on in terms of, if you were a retailer, listening to this podcast, what would you sort of say, here's things to think about as you look at those two particular problems?
Yeah, so I mean, this was my first meeting for the Forecourt and the ANPR group, and I joined the call thinking, surely this is quite a simple thing to resolve. How wrong was I? There's a huge complexity, I think, to the technology that's being used, and particularly the different types of offender profile as well, and how technology might or might not impact upon them. So we talked about things like organised criminal groups that were, stealing in bulk. It was quite eye-watering, some of the examples that were given. The forgetful people, as you said, the police themselves have been guilty of this. It's a genuine mistake. It might be a genuine mistake that you don't have any means of payment. You haven't just driven off, you've held your hands up, but how do you then ensure that you track that person at a later date? And then your sort of occasional opportunists, particularly coming towards the end of the month when people's budgets have perhaps started to get a bit tighter. You mentioned collusion as well, and I feel that isn't still quite enough visibility on exactly how this is being operated by staff. So perhaps a bit more, research or, evidence around that, I think, is really key. But let's just talk about ANPR then, because this was a big focus of the meeting, obviously, and there were some good examples in the presentation about how this was effective, the way that it was being used. And a lot of the conversation then shifted to training of staff. We want to make sure that employees feel supported, that they feel safe, confident, when the ANPR is triggered, and also improve their morale as well around this. So I thought this was interesting around what do you do when you get an alert? That's really key. What were your observations on this? What did you feel was sort of best practice from what we heard?
Well, yes. So to your point, what one of the metrics that one of the retailers used is the number of drive-off incidents prevented, and that's when some vehicle has committed a crime at one of the retailer's premises and then comes back, or it could be the same premise and come back. So then you're asking about, how is that interaction handled? And my sense is that that it was quite well handled, because there is digital evidence to sort of say, well, look, you came in on this particular date and you drove off. I've been instructed by my head office that I cannot authorize this pump. Huge apologies. If this has been a mistake, please let us know and write to us.
Yeah, and I really liked as well the focus on protecting staff, that they could just use the tannoy so that they didn't have to, have any sort of close proximity to somebody, the potential for that becoming aggressive. So that felt like a good way to sort of support staff as well. You mentioned the sharing of data and intelligence. I was quite surprised around in the UK that the suggestion was that the DVLA is still paper-based. So it sounded like hugely resource intensive.
I think you also have to use postal orders, if you remember those. Yeah, it's a really convoluted, paper-based effort for petrol forecourt retailers to get hold of DVLA details, and it's annoying because it takes up time and envelopes. But even more sort of perhaps galling is that the car park operators can do it almost, that they now have access to it, basically, the car park operators. Now, what we did hear from the police who were on the call was that there may well be some changes coming ahead, and which is really encouraging.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, it just seems like such a barrier. We live in a digital world, so yeah, it feels very archaic. One of the things that I came to the call with, and I think a lot of people presume, is that pay at pump is the answer. And we heard quite clearly from the retailers on the call that all the margin is in the shops, and so they would just be losing so much in lost sales if you had that mandatory pay at pump. And I think one of the retailers went so far as to say this is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. There has to be a more sophisticated way of dealing with it, and it would appear then that ANPR is the answer.
Yeah, and I think we saw in terms of what the levels of losses were. We're most of them are under 1%. But it soon adds up because there's a lot of money sold here. So it's quite hard to get this prioritized within a big organization, because there's, certainly if the petrol forecourt is just part of a bigger shop, the losses in the petrol forecourt will be dwarfed by what they lose in the store, and it's a distance away. So getting a level of priority. But bring back to your point about the sort of pay at the pump, it is the model around the world. And so the police are very keen to promote this model. Well, you'll solve all your problems, and but you support your business. And we also heard though that there were a lot of people who that weren't so keen on the pay at the pump. There's some issues around contactless payment. That doesn't seem to work so well. The people who there just seem to be and I've seen it myself. The pay at your pumps just aren't used. People prefer to because they maybe want to buy something. They prefer to fuel up and then go in the shop. So that seemed to be, a trend. We heard about overnight monitoring of these things. So when you can operate these remotely overnight, so people are doing that. But I still think there's sort of the model that, you see out there where you've got a convenience store and a petrol station. I think that's something that shoppers find attractive as a sort of a business model. And certainly retailers seem to as well. So it seems to me that technology through digital reporting, integration with the video, making that whole thing quite seamless, and then being able to pass it on to the police really quickly, being able to block repeat offenders, really has the potential in 5 years' time really to make it possibly quite difficult to steal a car and get fuel. I think there's opportunities in terms of video analytics to when that DVLA database can be made up. Look, here's a registration number, because clone plates are a big problem. Here's a registration number. It should be a red Mercedes. Oh, hang about, it's a white Ford. What's going on here? So I think video analytics, it wouldn't seem to be a stretch, given the stuff that we see in other parts of the retail world that we both work in, for big cars, number plates which are easy to read, to have that sort of video analytics. I think motorbikes might be another more problematic, but it seems pretty encouraging that actually digital technology could prove to be somewhat valuable here and potentially solve the whole problem, because if you get banned, if that number plate is banned, how do they get fuel?
No, absolutely. And that evidence as well or intelligence is of so much use to law enforcement. More broadly, we know that vehicle theft of, luxury vehicles is on the increase, and then those vehicles being used for other illicit activity. So, I think, it's part of a bigger jigsaw, isn't it? Putting all the pieces together and law enforcement working with retail to support one another.
Well, and I think that they're more advanced in the use of this down in Australia and certainly New Zealand, where New Zealand would be able to go into some of these digital evidence apps, if you like, type in the number plate and see which petrol forecourt they turned up at. And one of the advantages of petrol forecourt is you see the driver and the driver's accomplices are in the store but also at the pump, with much better pictures of them. So I can see for law enforcement this could become a real enabler for them to better detection of other crimes other than just driving off. So I think it's a real way that retailers can connect to law enforcement and help make the sort of whole area a bit safer. So it's quite encouraging from that point of view.
Definitely, I'm really excited to see how this space develops.
Yes, and we heard a snippet of that, didn't we? Some of the fraud going on with the electric charging. That'll be the next thing that how people are sort of trying to diddle their way to free charging. So that's why we work on the dark side. You see, there's always work for us in the dark side of retail. But no, thanks for that. And we are regrouping again in January 2026, and so we'll see what progress has been made. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to all the ECR retail loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast. And if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.